Hey there, how you doing? It's your friend Phil here, project management trader and coach. Today we have a lot of stuff to talk about. This is where we talk about the monitoring and controlling process group in a little bit of detail. So today we're taking a look at the processes validate scope, control scope, control schedule, and control cost. I'll go over that again. Validate scope, control schedule, control cost. These processes are very easy to master. I'm going to show you a very simple system to get it down to a rhythm with these processes. First of all, I'll talk about the output that you get from most of these processes I've mentioned that have the word control in them. So let's talk about control scope, control schedule, and control cost. The main aim of these processes is to govern scope, govern schedule, govern cost, and make sure that the team is following the plan for these knowledge areas. Control scope is the process that the project manager uses to prevent gold plating and scope creep. A good project manager enforcing the control scope process will prevent people from adding extras, will make sure that if people have any changes in scope, they go through the right process, which is perform integrated change control for review and ultimately approval or rejection. Control schedule is where the project manager prevents people from extending the schedule, from doing things that are not what the schedule dictates. And control cost is the process that enforces governance as to how the budget is expended, to how the project team meets those cost targets that were outlined on the project way back. See? So all these three, whether you're controlling scope, schedule, or cost, you are controlling cost or controlling scope or controlling schedule. So think about the iron triangle, time, cost, and scope. And all you're doing is trying to keep that triangle picture perfect. You're trying to prevent that triangle from being distorted. That's really what you're doing. So there's honestly not that much to talk about, except in control cost, where we have so many different formulas, that need to be remembered. Other than that, it's very easy to get the concept of what happens in these controlling processes. So let's zero in to talk about some of the common things that happen in these controlling processes. If you are in control scope, control schedule, control cost, you will always see as an input work performance data. Write that down. It's one of these recurring themes that's so important. WPD, work performance data, always an input to control schedule, control scope, control cost. I will even go further to say anywhere you see a monitoring and controlling process group process, work performance data is always an input to it, with the exception of those in integration, which we talked about yesterday. Those do not have WPD going into them. But everything from scope all the way down to stakeholder, you will always see WPD. All right? Good. Now, another recurring theme in these monitoring and controlling process group processes are you always see the project management plan as an input to them. So the three I mentioned, control scope, control schedule, control cost, The project management plan is always an input to them, always. Okay. Now, any process in monitoring and controlling, in fact, will use the project management plan as an input, whether it's an integration all the way down to stakeholder management. Yes, they all use the project management plan as an input. So the 4 that we're talking about today do as well. Now let me go back to validate scope that I've kind of left out. Validate scope is all about the customer doing a final inspection of the verified deliverable that you've sent in for inspection, doing a final inspection of that, and deciding if it is going to be accepted. And if it is accepted, then you have, what do you have? Accepted deliverable, right? Sometimes the names throw me for a loop. Accepted deliverables. That's what you get if the customer approves the verified deliverable. Now, to get your bearings straight with the verified and accepted and deliverable itself, I'd like you to search for my video, because we can't do it justice here. Search for my video on YouTube, PMBOK Guide Mainlines, and take a look at how a deliverable becomes a verified deliverable, and how that verified deliverable becomes an accepted deliverable, and how that leads to the final product, service, or result transition output from closed project or phase. And if that has confused you, you probably want to take a look at that video. If all these terms don't make sense to you, they should be at your fingertips by now. All right, so that's what you do in validate scope. Validate scope is all about your customer doing the final inspection and deciding if that deliverable, and you know, by final inspection, I'm not talking about a big bang at the end of the project. No, you could have iterative episodes of validate scope. You could have validate scope for component X, validate scope for component Y, validate scope for component Z, and then X, Y, and Z are now integrated, and you could have a validate scope for all of these 3 items integrated. So validate scope, you don't need to wait till the end of the project and then a big bang and the customer says no, and you've wasted so much time and money. No, do your validate scope incrementally. So validate scope, however you do it, has the same hallmarks of the monitoring and controlling process group. Work performance data going in, work performance information coming out, you know? And I've talked about WPD, WPI, WPR in a separate video. Look for that video on YouTube where I break this down and I talk about what work performance data is, raw observations, why it goes into these controlling processes for analysis, for you to come out with work performance information that is analyzed work performance data, now in context. And that WPI that comes out of these processes we're talking about today, it goes back into monitor and control project work. It goes back in there to be compiled into a report, into a work performance report, which is an output of monitor and control project work. So I hope all I'm saying makes sense. I know it's a lot of content today, but I really wanted to focus on WPD, WPI, and the project management plan going in to all of these monitoring and controlling processes. Okay? Also, not to be forgotten is project management plan updates, project documents updates from these processes, right? We usually have from control scope, from control schedule, from control cost, we will have these updates, project management plan updates, project documents updates. It's a recurring theme. You always see them in these controlling process group processes, specifically those that happen below integration. You will also see as an output change requests. So change requests are an output of these processes of the monitoring and controlling process group, change requests. You'll see change requests coming out all the time. Okay. Now there's there's some peculiarities, okay? I've not gone through every single peculiarity of these monitoring and controlling processes, but I would suggest that you put them all side by side and take a look at all of them for commonalities. You know, see what common inputs, common tools and techniques, common outputs they have. For example, expert judgment and meetings. You'll find that in these control schedule, control scope, control cost processes. You'll also find between control schedule and control costs, which are a bit numeric driven, you'll find analytical techniques. But you won't find that in control scope, okay? So let's go over these processes one more time to make sure you really understand them. Control scope. This is where the project manager prevents gold plating, scope creep, and any other bad scope behaviors that the team may be prone to introduce into the project. Control schedule. This is where the project manager makes sure that the schedule is obeyed, enforces the schedule, and if any changes need to happen to the schedule, this is where those changes are funneled to perform integrated change control through a change request. Control cost. This is where the project manager prevents the project team from overspending or from misappropriation of funds. Now, in control cost, folks, we have a very heavy earned value management discussion that is beyond the scope of this particular episode. Again, go to the videos on YouTube under the Praizion channel and search for where earned value has been discussed in lots of detail. So many hours of videos. Also, look out for the 4 Phases of EAC video. We have a video out there. It's called the 4 Phases of Estimate at Completion, and we talk about what these EAC formulas mean. For your exam, make sure you understand the makeup of CPI, SPI, CV, SV, and the 4 EACs. Also, make sure you understand the 2 Complete Performance Index. What does it mean if TCPI is 1 or 1.5 or 0.7? What does it mean if your EAC is smaller than your BAC? What is the variance at completion likely to be? What does it mean if on a graph your earned value is lower than your planned value and your actual cost is higher than the planned value line? What does it mean? What does it mean if you have a CPI less than 1, an SPI greater than 1, or an SPI equal to 1? What do all these things mean? You need to be able to take that data and you need to be able to transform it into a meaningful discussion. You also need to be able to take that information and transform that information to sensible actions to realign your project, to get your project back on track, so on and so forth. All right? So it's one thing to have all this great earned value management data, but it's another thing to act on it. And on the exam, you will be asked questions. What does this earned value data mean? What should we do with this earned value data? What is the outcome? Or what will the outcome of the project be if by month X, this is how it looks? You know? So just get ready to answer all manner of earned value questions, questions that will be very easy if only you were thinking in the right direction. There's some questions that can make you calculate on tons of paper only to discover the answer might be 0, or the answer right off the bat may be inconclusive, or the answer right off the bat may be something that is so simplistic if only you were in the right zone of thinking, the right frame of mind. And to be in the right frame of mind, folks, you have to know these earned value formulas really cold. You have to know them cold, and you have to be ready to manipulate them any way that these questions come. But like I said, please take a look at the videos on the Praizion channel, because this particular day on 40 days to PMP and CPM exam success is not for that. And that concludes today's episode. Remember to visit www.praizion.com. Take a look at the numerous training materials. If you need mentoring, coaching, and training one-on-one, take a look at that option as well. I wish you all the best in your study. I hope today's episode was useful. Validate scope, control schedule, and control cost. Lots of heavy stuff. Speak to you tomorrow.